Welcome back to Attic to Basement Estate Cleanouts with Raccoons. Today I want to talk about one of the most memorable houses I worked in. It's a 1924 arts and crafts house, 1,300 square feet, and built by the owner in 1924. In fact, there was still wood left over from the building in the basement when the son died and the house went up for sale in 2005. It was the first and only time that I had a large amount of timbers and floorboards left over in a house. I went to a nearby lumber store and asked them if they knew anyone who would want to pick up the lumber and take it away for free. They gave me the number of two men, and the second one I called picked up his phone, and he said he would come with a helper the next day to take away the lumber. Now that we recently built our own house and I know the price of floorboards and timbers, I can understand why the wife of the older son was upset I had not sold the wood. In 2005, I didn't think 70-year-old cut wood planks had much value, and this was before reclaimed wood was so popular. I thought it was good to save the estate the cost of junk hauling heavy wood. The neighbors got together and bought the property so it would remain looking the same and they would rent it out. One of the new owners was a prior council member for Montgomery County. I was told the first owner who built the house had a heart attack while cutting down a tree in the backyard, and he died up in the tree in a harness. The EMTs had to lower him down and take him out of the harness. He worked for the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. He had two sons, and one never married and continually lived in the house. He repaired watches and clocks as a hobby, and even his little watchmaker's workbench and watch parts went to auction along with many mantle clocks and wristwatches. Items from the closet darkroom that was down in the basement, a drill press and lathe, also went to auction with the furniture and glassware. The second floor of the house was a sleeping loft. Wooden swing-down windows that hooked up to the ceiling were all around the room. Screens must have made it a wonderful place to sleep during the hot Chevy Chase summers in the 1930s. We came across a few model boats which the sons had sailed on the reflecting pool across the street from the U.S. Capitol. Just wonderful memories of old-time D.C. I found photos of the men as boys, which the wife of the one didn't want, as they were in their late 80s with no children. I kept them as I thought they were so adorable. Here they are. I still think they're adorable. The garage was under the house in the back. Inside was parked a Chevy Chevette, which had not been run in a long time. When the auction owner came with a crew to empty the house, he said that if he could get it out to the street, he would sell it. We all pushed that car out of the garage, into the concrete strip and grass driveway, and out into the street. There was a tabletop music box with metal records that went to auction. It was lovely and worked beautifully. I would have bought it, but it was out of my price range. It sold for over $1,000. The house had a Stickley cabinet that went to auction. I'm sure it was an original Stickley, not a newer one. The dining room had built-in cupboards, which the auction owner drooled over and said he wished he could take them out and sell them. That wasn't allowed. This house had a lot of good memories, but it also was the only house I had to send a list to the executor of what went to trash. My son was my only helper on that job. He was home from college and helped me clean out the attic, except he kept stopping to read books he came across. A month later, after I sent my invoice for $2,700 and the executor said she would pay me, but in the end I had to send registered letters and start the process of small claims court back in my hometown, which is where the executor and her husband lived. I think the correct term is executrix. I did eventually get paid 2 months later for all 55 hours. When the executor got the notice of the small court claims date, she called and told me she was going to pay me as she couldn't get up the steps to the courthouse. This house was worth $650,000 in 2005 and probably had been paid for since 1944. So all the money was for the family, which was, as far as I know, just this son and his wife. A bank wasn't getting anything. When the people initially called me and I talked about my hourly fee and how many hours it might take to clean out a house, if they didn't make an appointment by the end of the call to have me come out and walk through the house for assessment, I knew they were frightened by the cost. What I tried to make clear to them is if the house was paid for with no mortgage, my fee was a drop in the bucket compared to the money they would make on the sale of the house. And we worked so quickly that the house could be on the market or in the hands of a remodeler or handyman within 1 or 2 weeks of us starting, depending on how big the house was and how much stuff was in the house and the garage. I had people call and tell me that they were going to the house every weekend for 2 to 3 months and still hardly anything had emptied. Then I would explain that since I wasn't emotionally involved in any of it, it went much quicker. We would walk into a room, say, is this saleable? If not, is it good enough for charity or is it just trash? If it was trash, it went in a trash bag. Most family members would admit that once they got working, they often stopped to remember about where they got an item they picked up, for example, the knick-knack on a family vacation. And they started talking about the deceased family member. And then that could be 20 minutes to an hour could go by. I even worked in 3 different homes where the executor came from across the country every weekend for months and still wasn't finished in the house. But they were burned out and they finally decided to hire me. The next house is from 2006. A house in Bethesda worth $585,000 was built in 1958 with 2,000 square feet, which was mostly fine, until you got in one bedroom, which was frozen in time when a part of the ceiling fell onto a bed, and it was left like that for years. This owner had lamps that had figures of people on them. Not bad, just unusual to find so many in one house. Also unusual, besides the hole in the ceiling in the bedroom, was the $259 in cash, in change, that we found around the house. This job took 4 people and 55 hours to clear out. The next job we had in 2006 was to inventory what was in a storage unit in Sterling, Virginia. I took a camera and a pad of unlined paper. I opened boxes and unwrapped items and took photos of them. Luckily, this unit had enough room in the unit for me to lay things out on a table, and I didn't have to work out in the hall. That's not so convenient if other people need to walk by the unit. I found 113 items, including religious statues, mechanical metal toys, trunks, and walking canes. I went home and wrote a report, had the photos printed, and sent it all with my invoice to the attorney. It's a shame that such wonderful things were kept in storage for several months. This was a simple one-day job, which I did by myself. I did learn to wear heavy clothing and thick-soled shoes, as the concrete floors in storage units are cold all year long, and colder in the winter. And this was done in November. Well, that's all for now. As you can see, it's storming outside. Thanks for listening. Please watch my other episodes to hear more about a few of my 800 clients and tips on estate cleanouts. Bye.